Hello, everybody. Bo Billington with the Free Agent Podcast. Yet once again, I've got Winnie da Silva here joining me. Thanks so much for joining, Winnie.
Thank you, Bo. It's good to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So today's topic is executive coaching. What is it and why it's such a hot topic right now, and how maybe a growing business could utilize such a resource. And wanted to have Winnie on because she's an executive coach for many, many years, leadership consultant, and also helps companies build effective teams. So prior to jumping into everything, why don't you tell us a little bit more about kind of what you do and why you do it?
Sure. Yeah. So, I do those three things. So executive coaching, leadership development, team effectiveness work. I also have my own podcast, which is called Transformative Leadership Conversations.
Nice.
Really just talking to leaders, my clients, other great people about their leadership journey. So do all four of those things. And, for me, why I do it, I really love helping people come to insights, helping people have those aha moments in terms of who they are, their performance, achieving success, becoming great leaders. So I guess that's the short version of it.
No, I love that. It's amazing how much more effective you can be if you're actually passionate about your career and your job. And that's one of the reasons I had to start my own business, 4.5, 5 years ago, is because I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. And I knew there was something out there that I could do for the next 20, 30 years that I would actually enjoy. And It's amazing. It shines through with you when you're talking. You've got this great energy. And so it's really nice to talk to somebody that actually likes what they do for a career. So kudos to you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I just want to make a comment what you're saying. It's like, you can be good at a lot of things, but are you enjoying it? Do you love it? Right. And sometimes those can be different.
Absolutely. If you're not happy, it shines through, which does. Has a negative effect most of the time. So, how'd you get into executive coaching?
Yeah, it's sort of a interesting road. So I started out actually in social work. I have a master's degree in social work. And then after doing that for a couple of years, realized it wasn't a good field for me. And part of the reason is because I felt like I'm the kind of person who wants to get things done, make progress, drive forward. And social work is really, you're talking about really embedded long-term, issues and challenges that people are dealing with.
So a slow burn, just a slog.
A slow burn, exactly. Yeah, really high burnout, slow burn. Yeah. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. Did a bunch of informational interviews, tried to figure things out, and really luckily landed in business consulting, which was kind of a far cry from social work. Sure. And started out actually doing some training, and then moved into business consulting in a change management practice with Arthur Andersen Business Consulting. And so when Arthur Andersen died, basically went to work for one of our clients as their head of learning and development, which was another great kind of big learning curve. And then when I had my first daughter, really wanted to have more flexibility in my life. Sure. And back then that wasn't something that people, it wasn't a thing.
Absolutely. You have a family? Oh, I'm so sorry for you,
Exactly. And now it's very different. But back then it was like, well, can I do this? Can I try that? Nope. We just want you here, So so I'm like, it's just not going to work out. Ironically, they actually ended up bringing me back on, and they ended up becoming my first client, which was really wonderful. And in fact, I still work with them today. So 16 to 17 years later. And then just started on my own doing this kind of work. So it's been an interesting journey, but I kind of feel like doing social work and doing business consulting, even though they sound like they're on different ends of the spectrum, really, I think, give me a unique perspective and view into executive coaching, because it's about the person holistically. Really? Right. But it's also about getting business results.
I think like when you said that they were on total sides of the spectrum, I get that. But for me, there seems to be a tremendous amount of overlap. Yeah. And it's a natural progression for somebody, especially that wants to move quicker, see results faster, but then have flexibility that you can have with your own business. Yeah. And so, congrats to you too for, working for a company and then being able to flip that into your first client. That doesn't always happen. Yeah. So why do you personally believe that executive coaching is so impactful for organizations? And of course, it's been around, for ages, but I feel in the last 3-5 years, it's really kind of exploded in growth. And so why do you personally feel that, companies can benefit from leveraging somebody with your expertise?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it really has expanded and become more sort of normal, right? People are really wanting this more. I mean, honestly, I think that there's a lot going on in people's lives, more and more. And obviously with the pandemic, that's just made things even worse. But I think, when you've got stuff going on personally and professionally, and organizations are more tuned into wanting to really not only show people that we care about you, right, in terms of benefits and that kind of thing, but actually put behind some real emphasis. And I think, giving people an opportunity to get executive coaching really says something to people. Like, I really care about you. I care about your career. I care about where you're going. And I think in some ways it really offers the organization, not only a way to say that I support you, but to get that business results at the same time. Because, when you think about the kind of work that I do, I usually work within an organization. And what that will end up meaning is, it's not just about that person. Hey, can you help that person? There's this person over here. It's like, this is like all about the organization too. What I learned in social work is it's like about systems. It's about the environment, right? And how everything affects each other. So when I'm working with an executive, and I'm like doing a 360 and talking to some of the people, some of either their manager or their peers or their direct reports, one of the questions that I ask is, how can you support this person? So, in some ways what I'm doing, I'm coaching that person, but in some ways I'm kind of coaching the environment and coaching the people around them too, because they are going to play a very important role in helping that person be successful.
That's interesting. I like the point you brought up too about maybe being an added benefit to the executive team, so they feel that the company's truly invested in their success, both personally as well as professionally. And I agree, COVID's really changed. It's blurred the lines between home and work, and I think it's great personally. I mean, I've got a family. When my kids, 3 years ago, my kids would bust into my office. I'm on a Zoom, and I'd be anxious. I'd be embarrassed. And now, honestly, it's just kind of comes with the territory, and I am 100% okay with that, because that's right. My real life. That's who I am, right?
That's right.
So I think that's great. So are you kind of like one part business coach, one part like life coach therapist? Is it really kind of a blend of the two?
It's a really interesting question. I almost feel like you'd have to ask my clients. I mean, I really focus on business coach. I really focus on the executive. So when I think of the work that I do, I'm thinking of, how can I help you be successful? And when I think about you being successful, the most successful people that I work with, when I know that I'm making a real difference, they're seeing changes, not just at work, but at home. And that's when I know that whatever changes they're trying to make, or whatever kind of development they're working on, it's going deep, because it's impacting their whole life. So I wouldn't really say that I do life coaching. I really do focus on the business, but you can't help an executive be successful unless it touches them personally. So I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And when you mentioned earlier the 360-degree view, it kind of all came together when you're mentioning the human component as well. So it's really kind of a view of that person's ecosystem, and they are a person after all. And so that does make sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I had a client a while ago, and she said to me, she was working on, actually, this was kind of unusual, because she kind of had a temper and would, lash out to some of her colleagues and direct reports. And she was getting better. She was definitely kind of thinking through what's triggering her, what are the reasons why, what's the mindset behind why this is happening. And she said to me one day, now I can't yell at the waitress for getting my eggs wrong.
I should be doing that anyways, probably, right? I mean,
she should be doing that anyway, but she realized she was changing, and she literally couldn't not bring that change to like the restaurant.
That's fantastic. That's real progress. Be wary of the person that yells at the waiters, right?
That's right.
So another question for you. So, if you look at an organization, maybe you're having a conversation with the executive leadership team, what are some of the warning signs that maybe you look out for in regards to whether or not they need executive coaching? Is it turnover? Is it a hostile environment? Like, what's the catalyst for somebody really needing to hire a Winnie?
So I would actually flip that question around, to be honest, because normally it can go both ways. So I don't want to discount that kind of a situation, but a lot of times what's happening is someone's gotten promoted, right? And it's like, wow, this is a big jump for me. Can I handle it? Is this something that I have a learning curve, right? So I need some help getting over this learning curve. Or I'm being really successful in a lot of areas, but for whatever reason, I've got some blind spots. Or, by the way, I just don't know what my blind spots are. Right. And I just want to uncover them. Like, I want to be as good as I can be. And these blind spots, I know that I'm not sure I know about. I want to make sure I uncover them and hit them. So I think I'd turn that question around. Certainly there are people where it's like, yeah, there's some grumblings. But unless this person is already high performing, I don't advise really executive coaching to come in and help sort of fix a situation, because that's not usually helpful. And in fact, in that kind of situation, usually what coaching needs to have, where coaching is most helpful is actually with their boss, because they haven't been able to give
that
the
right person for the role. Yeah.
Or they haven't been able to give them feedback.
Sure.
Right? They haven't been able to sit down and say, this is really what's not working. And in fact, that's the person who needs the coaching, because they need to be able to give that feedback to that executive. So there's lots of reasons why, but I would say, I personally enjoy working with those folks who it's like, maybe they've got something that's like, there's something that's not quite working.
Sure.
But many times it's like, hey, I'm hungry to learn and grow. Let's go to the next level.
But who are you having this conversation with? Because I feel like self-realization, like doing a real audit about who you are and your own gaps is very difficult. So are you typically having that discussion with, maybe their boss who's like, hey, Winnie, we need some help with, with Bobby over here? Like who are you having this conversation with typically?
Yeah, it can go both ways, actually. So many times it's the organization who reaches out to me to say, hey, we've got this person, we'd like to get them some coaching, get them support. Sometimes people reach out to me and say, I'd like to get coaching, and I'm going to convince my company to pay for it, or or maybe they'll pay for half of it and I'll pay for the other half. I think that's great too. So, usually it kind of depends on the company's culture and how they think about coaching.
So if they're really progressive, then maybe they're going to be on top of it, reach out proactively to Winnie to ensure that the people they have are in the right seats at the right time, yes, doing the right things. Right.
And how you can tell if the company has a culture of where executive coaching is welcomed is depending on who I talk to. Like, I meet them for the first time to see if it's a good fit. They're like honored that they might get an executive coach. Where at another company, they're like, oh shoot, what happened? Yeah. Why am I getting an executive coach?
I want one. I mean, seriously, like, right? I think it's fantastic. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. But there are some where it's like, the only people who get coaching here, we know there's a problem. And that's not a great situation.
Right. It's probably not the right fit for you either, because you're coming in at a deficit. All eyes are on kind of you, the coaching, and this individual. And it kind of starts with a negative connotation versus like, it's a good thing. They're getting coaching to be better, not because they're deficient.
That's exactly right. You got it.
That's a very, very interesting point. I think it's a good segue to the next question. So when I think of executive coaching, I think of, Fortune 500, maybe Fortune 100, Fortune 50, large companies. They've spent and invested a tremendous amount in their executives. And so they can't be at a flight risk. Right. And so again, going back to the earlier point, this is kind of an added benefit to them. So is executive coaching good for both big and small companies? Is it better suited for the large, multinational companies? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, really interesting question. Especially back to what you asked about first, right? In terms of the growth of executive coaching and all that. I would say that every company could benefit from coaching, no matter how big or how small. Now, it's all goes back to budget, right? And what can you afford? But honestly, obviously this, you could see them as a competition, but I think there's some really nice opportunities right now to actually, look into other organizations that do executive coaching. Mm-hmm. It's not the same thing. When you're talking about like these virtual, like Better Up and organizations like that, where it's like, it's very accessible. The price point is very low. It's not the same thing that I offer
Sure.
at all. But you know what? I don't have to coach everybody. You know what I mean? And if
You've
you
got your
can,
niche.
yeah,
And
and you know what? I think BetterUp actually provides at least an entree into coaching for people at a junior level who might be at an organization that might be quite small. That can be really great. So I think that it can be really for everybody. It's a matter of finding, the right fit.
that's great. So bottom line is, all companies of all sizes are prime for executive coaching. Obviously, budget's going to be a big factor and determinant, who as to who you can work with. But there's options out there for both small as well as large companies.
Exactly. And I've done both. I mean, one of my clients that I worked with early on in my career, it was just him and one other employee when we started. And then he grew his company to like 15 people. He recently sold it over the last year. I still work with him, and he's referred me to so many people. And he was a great client. We did training, we did HR stuff. I mean, I helped him in so many ways. And I love working with him and his company. And that's very different than what I, might do today. Although I do work with a lot of startups too. Sure. And they're so fun to work with because they're hungry. Right. They're on their edge, they're edgy in terms of doing interesting things, both in terms of the stuff that they do, but also in terms of how they think about leadership. So I love working with those guys too.
Got it. No, makes sense. Are there any industries that you'd say are more primed for coaching than others?
I really don't think so. Yeah, I really don't. If you've got leaders, you've got people who, there's teams and you want results. No, I mean, I worked in construction management. I work in private equity. I work in, media, in fashion, everywhere, which I love because I'm motivated by learning and change for me. And so to be able to work in so many different industries, it's super fun.
Got it.
Yeah, really fun.
No, I love that. That's very, very broad, very diverse, and answers the question, which is great. So are there general areas that, maybe individuals or companies are most interested in being coached? Like what are the hot spots, over the last 1-3 years, and what areas in which do you focus the most personally?
You mean in terms of like topics or?
Yeah, just areas for actual executive coaching.
Yeah.
Right? What are they looking for? Is it, personnel management? Is it?
I see. Yeah. So, it's interesting. I mean, leadership is really the key, right? But when you say leadership, like, what does that mean?
Right.
And I think what happens in our sort of society, not only are we pretty isolated, and, we don't have I think people feel like they don't have a lot of people they can reach out to, which is why executive coaching, I think, is really hot right now. It's kind of like having that personal trusted business advisor, that you can go to and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Help me think through this. Help me be more strategic. Help me to have a different perspective or think about it in a way that otherwise I wouldn't, because, we're talking about it together. I think that there's a big chunk there, but I think honestly, there's some basic leadership skills that even senior leaders never learn to do really well. So things like what I call situational leadership, like, when do you delegate? Delegation is really something that a lot of leaders don't always do really well.
Very difficult. Yeah.
Very difficult. Yeah. How to set really good expectations for your people in terms of being able to tackle a project or even their role. When you think about communicating and coaching your people, again, really, when you think about leadership, you think about feedback, being able to give feedback, but also ask for feedback.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So those are a lot of the topics that I both do coaching on as well as training, which is why I love doing both, because I have tools, I've got a process, I've got frameworks, I've got research that I've done on these topics, and then I teach them. But then I can also really easily coach people on how to access those and use them given their particular situations. And then, by the way, those people that I coach, those are great examples that I can bring to training and say, hey, here's an example of how someone used this, right?
Yeah, use cases are everything. I did something about storytelling recently, and it's one of the most effective ways to communicate. So if you have a story of what happened, people can digest that easily. That's right. So they really do go hand in hand. But I just think those basic leadership skills, but in addition to that, I think there is a whole,
trusted advisor.
Yeah.
How do I overcome this learning curve that I'm in? And hopefully, if you're good at what you do and you are ambitious in terms of learning, you're an executive who's constantly taking on new opportunities and new challenges, right?
Yeah.
And so when we do that, I think people are looking for support. How can I think about this? How can I tackle it? How can I use what I know and apply it? The other thing that I think is interesting about coaching too is usually our strengths can be hidden weaknesses, right? And so many times what we're really good at, we got to keep that and we got to learn how to leverage it. But sometimes those strengths can get in our ways and can become our weaknesses. So that's like another thing to watch out for, because again, the more senior you get, the more refined you are in terms of knowing what your strengths are. Mm-hmm. But then how do you, again, embrace those blind spots and then watch out for how your strengths how they might get in your way.
Right. Conversely, maybe turn weaknesses to strengths, right? To the use of a coach. And I really like the point you brought about delegation. And that's something I've struggled with myself. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, I'll just get it done myself because it's easier. I know exactly what's needed versus delegating. I think that's a big trap. Also the feedback component, I think that's critical. It's one thing to give feedback, but you need to be in a position to receive it.
Yes.
And it kind of, I think that ties well with the old adage that people don't leave companies, they leave, bosses or managers or leaders, what have you. And being able to receive feedback from your team, I think is critical. And that's a hugely missed, this is an assumption, hugely missed opportunity for a lot of leaders out there.
For sure.
So I think that's a great point that you bring up.
Yeah, no, I can't emphasize that enough. And I think honestly, Bo, the more senior you get, the less people are comfortable giving you feedback.
Right.
I mean, that's just reality, right? So therefore it's on you as the senior leader to get feedback, to get real, honest, candid feedback. I did a podcast episode on my podcast with one of my mentors and someone that I've worked with for a long time. His name is Peter Axelson. Mm-hmm. And he's got an amazing approach on how to ask for feedback and how to receive feedback. And we did an episode talking about how to ask for feedback as executives, because I think unless you are constantly, uncovering what your blind spots are in your working relationships you're not going to hear about them.
Sure.
They're just going to get swept under the rug.
Yeah, but also it adds a level of vulnerability, So it's like people are like, wow, this person is human, like we're actually connected. And so, I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense. And then when you kind of combine that with what somebody like you can kind of suss out of an executive, it really kind of, that resonates with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it can be really a game changer for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody were to engage you or, another business consultant, what would a typical engagement timeline look like? I mean, are you working with them indefinitely? Is this a 3-month kind of engagement where you're parachuted in and then you're out? What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. So because I've been doing this for a while, the engagements can look really different. And because my main motivation is really like, where are you at? How can I help you? Let's figure out a way that and a system and a process and an approach that works for you. Mm-hmm. So I'll say that I'm really flexible and I like to figure out what's going to work for the person. However, typically what I will do is do a 6-month engagement. And so what that would look like is we would do, and hopefully, honestly, that person talks to more than just me. Like, hopefully they have a choice, right? So it's like, hey, I'll talk to Winnie, I'll talk to Bo, I'll talk to, Sally, get a couple of people, and then I make a choice, right? And I feel like I've got some ownership. Mm-hmm. So if you were to choose me and we did a 6-month engagement, I would do a 360. So like we were talking about that before, right? Yeah. So I would interview, at least 3 peers, 3 direct reports to make sure we protect confidentiality. I don't interview your boss, but I might also interview some other senior stakeholders. If you're the CEO or a founder, I might also interview board members. So kind of depending on, what your role is. So I interview people for about a half an hour, ask everyone the same question, put together a report based on that feedback and on that data. And then let me actually say something that's really important. I would actually ask that person to email the people that I'm going to be interviewing. Okay. So it's coming from them. So the email says something like, I'm going to be working on a leadership development opportunity. I'm going to be working with an executive coach, Winnie da Silva. She will be interviewing you. She'll be asking you for feedback. Thank you in advance for your feedback.
Please be honest. Right.
And please be honest. Please be honest. Thank you. And by the way, this isn't happening like behind the scenes. Like, I know this is happening.
I think
I want it to happen.
That's
right.
A great point. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's important because again, it's about ownership and it's about being open about what we're doing and why we're doing it. We're not, hiding anything. Right.
Sure.
Anyway, so collect the data. We go over the data together. Then that person would create a coaching goals. Mm-hmm. Like, what do I want to do with this data? Like, what does this mean to me? Let me create some goals that I want to have as part of this coaching engagement. And then if it's appropriate, we would meet with your boss and you would have an opportunity to share those goals. If you want to share that report, you can, but otherwise it's completely up to you. So in other words, if I'm working with a company, even though they've hired me and they're paying me, I don't share that report with anybody else except for that person.
You have an allegiance to the individual you're coaching.
You got it. Exactly. So, but if they want to share it, great. Sometimes they do. And I always point that out, that that's not usual. And they obviously trust you, boss. I think
I would want to keep my gaps a little closer to the vest, to be honest with you, but
and that's fine.
That's me.
And that's normal. I mean, I think that's okay too. So anyway, but we do meet with your boss, and say, here are my goals. Are these the right ones? Like, are we aligned on what I should be working on? And by the way, boss, manager, do you have any additional feedback for this person? So I already start to create an environment where that person, the two people that I'm working with, their manager and the coachee, I want them to feel like they can start to share feedback with each other. So I'm already kind of facilitating that and asking that. And so it feels more normal than maybe if it hasn't before. So anyway, we do that. And then we meet usually once every other week for about an hour. But it's an engagement where they call me anytime, text me, email me, because it's the kind of thing where you've got an important meeting that's coming up, or maybe you're struggling with something, or you just had a meeting that went sideways and you're like, I really want to debrief this right now. Right. Call me. Things don't happen on a scheduled time frame, right?
Right. So going back to kind of the trusted advisor component from earlier, that you're there and a safe place and somebody they can talk to. If they bomb a presentation, they're not going to call their boss, right?
No,
I mean, obviously
right.
They want to call you. So that makes sense. And then what after this kind of 6-month period or what have you, I would imagine coaching would be kind of akin to psychology, where there's an ongoing layer of support that would probably be beneficial. So are you kind of like then maybe change over to some sort of retainer base or some sort of other model where you just stay in contact kind of indefinitely?
Yeah. So great question. So obviously it depends on the person. Usually what I'll do kind of as a way for closure, I'll offer to meet again in another month just to check in. So there's just kind of that check in. So it doesn't feel, it always, even to me, it feels sort of abrupt when we're finished. It's like,
you're like break it up. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Goodbye. So I many times will offer that, but many times also they'll exactly what you said. It's like, okay, here's a bank of hours, use them as you'd like over the next X period of time. Or sometimes, I've done it recently where it's like, okay, let's do a whole nother engagement, maybe after 6 months or a year, or even 2 years. Like, hey, Winnie, I would love to have you come back. Let's do another 360, let's do this again.
Just
because I'm in a
track the progression and make sure that the gaps that you've identified have been overcome, or at least trending in the right direction.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yep. Yeah. So it really does depend, but it's so fun to work with people again, and feel like, not only are you making that kind of impact, but they just, they're just continuing to grow. And again, like you're just saying, trending, next challenge, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm sure there's a huge level of gratification for you, especially if you go into a broken situation, maybe kind of turn it around and then see somebody who is kind of, down and out, blossom. So I'm sure that's pretty neat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, even when it's not so extreme as that, I mean, they're just people who are kind of thinking through like I'll give you an example, especially for senior executives. How do I not navigate the political landscape?
That's one of the reasons I left corporate America, because I am not political. I can't kiss the ring. It's not in my DNA. Yeah. I think there's a way to do it appropriately. I just didn't learn it, I guess,
Well, and we all make our own choices, right? But if we're in a position where, and I think the more senior you get, the more you do have to figure out how to navigate the political landscape. Yeah. How do you navigate stakeholders, at all different levels across usually the enterprise? It's not just within your department, right? How do you navigate the enterprise? And so I think that's what's exciting, is feeling like, okay, I've knocked this out. Now there's another layer. I'm working with somebody and we're just wrapping up, and I've been working with him for 2 years and he's about to retire. I've never worked with anyone who's about to retire. And It's so funny because he just really wanted to keep it going, because from his perspective, he felt like he had learned so much, and it was kind of like, well, but now there's another stage. Well, now I got to make sure that I leave everyone here, because he's worked there for like 35 years, feeling like they're in a good spot. Right. So we've been working through that. So anyway, it's just really, it's really fun.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's great. So I read an article this morning, kind of prepping for the discussion. And it was from, Harvard Business Review, titled "The Wild West of Executive Coaching." Net of the article is that huge influx of business coaches. There's not really any certifications. There's not much regulation. I don't think there's any regulation. You know better than me. And so you've got this influx of coaches. Not all are qualified. And this kind of goes back to your point of our discussion earlier, that there's somebody for everybody, small companies, large companies.
Yeah.
But, for somebody that's maybe thinking about dipping their toe out there, how could they go about vetting a potential coach? Again, with it in mind that there's been a significant influx and there's not regulation, there's not certification, there's not something that states, hey, Winnie is a bona fide executive coach. Obviously your background suggests you are, but how can somebody kind of suss that out and really kind of determine that this is the right person for them?
Yeah. I mean, Bo, this is like a really hot topic in the coaching world. I mean, it really is. And honestly, I might not even be the best person to answer this question, because I myself actually don't have an official coaching certificate. Mm-hmm. And in fact, when I even thought about it, part of the reason I didn't do it is because I had already been doing it for a while. It didn't seem like a great use of time. Right. But many times, some of these coaching certification organizations, not all of them, but some of them, to me, the kind of coaching that they're doing is not exactly what I'm doing. Because again, I'm coming from like a business consulting perspective. Mm-hmm. And many times, not all, but it's like, well, just make sure you ask a lot of good questions. Don't step in and give your opinion.
Sure.
And I don't feel good about that. Like, I mean, not to say that I don't ask good questions, but it's like, hey, I'm coming with a lot of experience and perspectives and frameworks and ideas. And as appropriate, I want to make sure that I can share that with that person. And again, be a real partner.
Yeah.
But I think, to answer sort of your broader question, I think that what you really need to do is do the hard work yourself and figure out, what do you really want? What are you really looking for?
Sure.
What are either the kind of the results that you want, or what do you, from a personality or like perspective, who do you think you'd work with best? The more informed you are about what it is you want and the results that you want, the better choice you're going to make. So that's one. The second thing I would say is talk to more than like 2 people. Talk to like 3, at least 3 or 4. Get a good sense of like what people are bringing to the table, what their approach is, how they see coaching, and all that. And then you're going to be, again, you want to be a well-informed consumer of what it is you want, because it's you. I mean, you're the person who's going to, you have to do the work, right? And this person is going to be a guide for you. What kind of guide do you want?
I think it's some sage advice. So basically you kind of do an audit of maybe your gaps, your weaknesses, or more importantly, what you're trying to accomplish, and then map that back to the coach's skill set. And I think a lot as well would really matter, soft skills and how you interact with that individual.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's interesting because some people have picked me, and obviously some people have not picked me. Sure. And it's been kind of fun. I have a colleague, and we were both up for some coaching, and the first round, I got a bunch of the people that we talked to, and the second round, she got a bunch of the people that we talked to. Right. And we are very different, and we're colleagues, we're friends. I think we both do great coaching, but the way we approach things is different.
Sure.
And so the people that picked her, I mean, that's great. I mean, they found someone that they really think they can work well with, and they're going to be able to accomplish what they want from it. Awesome. Right. And for other people, you know, they're picking me for the same reasons. But you got to know what you want.
I think that makes sense. It all comes back to what are your objectives, right? And I completely agree too about your opinion on the certifications. It seems like maybe you've kind of outgrown that as well. And I feel that far too many companies are trying to monetize the certification, and then they're pushing lobbyists to make it kind of standard.
Yes.
And then maybe you're doing your constituents or your customers, you know, disservice by kind of working within their framework.
Yes.
It kind of limits the amount of flexibility you have. And
that's
so,
right.
You know, you're
no, I would totally agree with that. Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. The one coaching certification that I know of, and of course I'm not an expert and I don't know all of them, but one of them that I always recommend people to, if I talk to people and they're like, I want to get certified, so where should I go? I always recommend iCoach. Which is Michael Frisch, and I can't remember all of his colleagues' names, but Michael Frisch with iCoach. A bunch of my colleagues and a bunch of clients that I've recommended go there have all had a great experience. I think it's like 4 months. It's not a heavy lift.
Right.
They're very flexible in terms of the way that they teach it, their approach, their model. It's really good. But you're right. I think many times, you know, other organizations are kind of monetizing it and sort of like, you have to, and this is the way it's supposed to be. But it's like, you know, again, you need to do your own work, you know, like what's out there? What do you want to do? What approach would work best for you? And do the homework. Yeah,
no, totally agreed. So 2 more questions. Any other tidbits, thoughts, or otherwise that somebody should consider when thinking about maybe bringing an executive coach into the fold?
Yeah. And when you mean, are you talking about from an organizational perspective or from like, I want coaching myself?
Just maybe I want coaching myself. You know, what should some considerations be maybe in that regard?
So a couple of considerations to think about. Do you have the time? Are you really committed to spending the time, you know, doing this work? Because again, I'm only as good as the person I'm coaching. You know, like if you're committed, you're hungry for growth, you're hungry to take it to the next level in your career and in your role and what you're trying to do, I'm excited to work with you. But at the same time, you also have to carve out the time that it's going to take. And not just in our conversations. I'm talking about like the way that you think, you know, the way you're spending your time, how you approach things and how you're thinking about things. If those things aren't changing or you're not spending time being thoughtful about that, the work that we do an hour, you know, every other week is not going to cut it. This has to be a project, you know, and a commitment that you're taking on. So I think that's definitely something to consider. And I think just being open-minded, you know, it's like, and being excited about it. I mean, the people that I've worked with that I think have done really well, they have really enjoyed the process. They've really enjoyed learning about themselves in a new way. They want to see things from a different perspective. Like, tell me how you'd see this. Let's look at it together from a different perspective. How else could we look at it? What kind of business results do you want to get? And then let's back into that in terms of how you might need to change the way you think about things, how you act, your behavior. Your behavior is a big part of that. What part of this do you need to own? What part isn't your fault that you need to figure out how to manage and work with other people so that your relationships are sound? So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Makes sense. Yeah. Hey, awesome stuff. Thanks so much for your time, Winnie. How can people get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn, Winnie da Silva, DASILVA. I'm also have a website that you can find me on, which is just www.winniedasilva.com. And, you know, take a listen to my podcast because it's a kind of a nice way to get a taste of coaching kind of in general, but get to know some really awesome leaders that I interview as well.
That's awesome. We'll be sure to add your contact info to the end of this video. And sincerely, thanks so much. Love the conversation. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Bo. Thanks a lot.
Signing off.